Saturn, Saturn has lived in our mythologies for so many years simply because it is this place with rings. It wasn't until we sent spacecraft to Saturn and we imaged those rings that we realized that our simple models of this world that were drawn from photographic data based on Earth and not close-up imagery of its clouds and belts and storms and atmospheric patterns taken on site by these spacecraft, that those models were woefully lacking even by current standards of planetary science and physics. For instance, as spacecraft approached over the 70s and into the 80s, it gave us a stunning series of close-ups of these rings. The rings are 171,000 miles from tip to tip. From Earth, they appear to be divided into simple divisions, 1, 2, 3, and they were given designations, the A ring, the B ring, the C ring. But as the Voyager spacecraft showed us image after image of the rings, what did it reveal? It revealed rings, billions and billions, to echo my friend Carl, of junk, of debris, orbiting, whirling around the planet in orbit in periods ranging from a few hours to almost 15 hours. But the debris is orbiting in bands. The rings are banded like a long playing record. And there's no theory extant in current planetary science that can explain the bandings in the rings. As I looked at some of this imagery and I was preparing for this presentation, I had an interesting thought, and that was simply this. Suppose the bandings are ripples, higher level ripples in space-time, occasioned in the close vicinity of this extraordinary world by its massive rotation from 3 dimensions into 4 and higher, that we're looking at a literal physical link in our own backyard between the reality of every day and a reality that produces what we think of as the everyday. Because as you look at these objects, these little tiny worlds, this is Mimas, this is a moon that is less than the size of Connecticut. It has a geology and a topology on its own surface that in fact is an amazingly diverse landscape for a tiny chunk of ice that has no internal energy or power source that we can discern. Is it possible that in Saturn, in this spinning ball of liquid hydrogen and liquid helium, banded with clouds, orbiting almost once every 30 years around the center of the solar system, flanked by an exquisite set of concentric and enigmatic rings, that we are seeing an exemplification of the physics of a literal new age? Science is nothing if it's not prediction. The discovery of specific signatures now on planets as diverse as Mars and Saturn, corresponding to predictions made by the monuments of Mars, opens up literally overwhelming possibilities, not just for pushing clouds around on planets or positioning volcanoes, but for something dealing with the sources of the energy to do these things. Let me give you a couple of interesting examples. The Voyager missions a couple of years ago flew by the last planet of the system, Neptune. They measured during the flyby a fact that, inexplicably, Neptune is emitting almost 3 times more energy than it's getting from the sun. Question: where is the energy coming from? No one currently knows. It is our profound suspicion that the physics that we have decoded at Cydonia is telling us about a hyperdimensional source for this new energy. Or take the sun itself. For the last several years, scientists have been looking for nuclear particles supposedly coming from the center of the sun because of its thermonuclear reactions, a kind of chained H-bomb model. Well, for the last 20 years, they haven't found anywhere near as many of these particles as models would predict. In fact, the Soviets and the Japanese, who'd recently brought online experiments to measure fundamental particles, have found none. Is it possible that the very center of our solar system, this incredible blazing ball of gas around which all the worlds in this system orbit, is in fact fueled from another source. The fact, for instance, that its sunspots peak at the key 19.5 latitude may be the clue. Well, this opens up remarkable possibilities which, when we look back at our cultures on this planet and their attention to the sun, others may have also noticed. When we look then at the stars, at the sky at night, we're not seeing chained and imprisoned H-bombs, we're seeing portals to another dimension. And the portals are glowing windows through which we can peer and glimpse the fragments of a physics from another side. What is stunning is when you take that metaphor and you go back and you read the actual Egyptian descriptions and the hieroglyphs for Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, the description is Sirius is a doorway. Now, what did they know? What did they know? Now, if you're looking at that as a 20th century Egyptologist, or as a modern anthropologist, or as any of the academics looking at the history of man and archaeology, the obvious answer is they didn't know anything. It was all primitive superstition. We're going to show you in a few minutes that we have another point of view that we can now buttress with specific mathematical linkages that indicate strongly that the Egyptians, among others, were profoundly aware that the night and the night sky and all of reality is somehow circumscribed by the physics behind the circumscribed tetrahedral geometry given to us now by the monuments of Mars. And that, of course, is an amazing statement to be able to make. But there's another. Because the thought occurred then, after we had figured this part out, the potential, the possibility, that if in fact the sun is a gate to another dimension and the energy we see is merely a lower level transformation of a higher level force or energy or process, then it may be possible to harness such a process on Earth and to create an actual hyperdimensional technology. What could one do in terms of generating energy, electricity, and other phenomena if one could somehow figure out the math of the physics and then apply that in a technology for the betterment of all of us here and now on an Earth in peril with ozone depletion, with resource depletion, with oil limited to a few and needed by the many, all of the problems that civilization is heir to, of scarcity, of want, of privation, of inequality, injustice, all of them could be circumvented if a few simple technologies could be devised that would tap in an unlimited and non-polluting source of energy for the betterment of civilization on this planet at this crucial defining moment in world history, to quote Secretary Baker.